Okay, it's recording. I see a flashing red dot. All right, we're going to review Desert of Paradise, pages 70 to I think about 80 or 82 or so. Yeah, 82. There's 4 of us here today. Opalyn is going to show pictures to the YouTube people. And Mark is here. He was giving advice to Opalyn about how to show pictures to the YouTube people. And Katie's here. She's actually read the piece that we're gonna talk about. I've also read the piece that we're gonna talk about. And so a good round group. But everybody's in fact, I'm thinking all 3 of you have listened to most, if not all, of my podcasts. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. And
yes,
yeah. Katie, you're just saying yes?
yes.
And Opalyn?
I'm working my way through them. I listen to several every week.
Okay.
But
Not at all, but you're getting there.
yep.
Okay. All right. And of course my Kickstarter is doing magnificently. It's doing better than any of my previous Kickstarters, which kind of makes me think that maybe people are more interested in the skip book than they've been interested in any of my previous stuff, or maybe I've just gotten better at doing Kickstarters. I kind of feel like I'd be glad to like share all of my Kickstarter stuff, but I kind of get the feeling that people really don't care. They just it's like their interest is in permaculture, not in Kickstarter. Yeah, 71,000 right now. I think that when we were doing the Better World book, which was my previous all-time best Kickstarter, we were at about 50,000 at this point. So we're 20,000 ahead of that. It's pretty exciting. So I kind of can't help but go and look at all that stuff, 40 times a day. All right. Anyway. Desert of Paradise by Sepp Holzer. Buy the book. Although, Mark, you had an update on buying the book, because we in our last episode, you were on an adventure to go and acquire the book. How'd that work out?
Oh, well, the one book that I found for a reasonable price, that was the paperback edition, was in German. So fortunately, just from the review of the description of the book was all in German. And so everything about what I found was in German. So yeah, I went and purchased the Kindle version today. So I'll try to get caught up there. Interesting that Opalyn has seen paperbacks starting for $414 or $410 there. I think when I was looking at it, my 4 used or new via Amazon were like $56 or $65. Something like that. So interesting. Amazon must think that you have deep pockets there, Opalyn. And so therefore $400, like what's the big deal? It's only $400.
I'm pretty sure I got a paperback copy for not much more than the Kindle.
Yeah, it's supposed to go for like 30 or something. Yeah, but every place that I looked at, it said like they had 1 left, and then you try to place the order, oh, we're out, and they'd give you a refund, or they were out in general. So I don't know.
Yeah, I remember
maybe I'm not
buying
worthy of buying one.
Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I remember buying 2 different Sepp books at the same time, and it was $65. And on the back of my Chelsea Green Distributors copy, it's $29.95. So that's about what I paid.
Yeah, that sounds right. When I went to Chelsea Green, they didn't have it there. They were out of stock.
Did you try going out to Permanent Publications? I mean, it would be like they'd have to ship it from England, right? So that the shipping would be insane. But I don't know, maybe they would have that. All right, moving along, the book Desert of Paradise by Sepp Holzer. I kind of feel like it's important to say go buy the book. but apparently that could be a challenge. So, all right. This next section is drainage, overflow, and the invention of the pivoting monk, which later he calls the Holzer Monk, because he invented it. Water should not spill over the dam wall in heavy rain. An emergency drain needs to be installed instead. I usually build a spillway, overflow channel, that leads the water around the dam, preferably over natural ground. If that is not possible because of the existing landscape, I need to protect it from erosion and washout by installing a drainage pipe or a channel clad in heavy natural stones. I also use heavy natural stones for the inlets. I plant various water plants between the stones. They stabilize the sidewalls and prevent soil from being carried into the stream and pond. With heavy rainfall, the pond would become cloudy for weeks otherwise. So I kind of feel like it's important to state that he's saying, all right, there's two ways for the water to get out of the pond. There's going to be some kind of pipe, which in this case is going to be the monk, plus an emergency overflow. So which goes off to the side. Now I think that this is pretty standard pond building technique. And I'm pretty sure I've talked about this several times in these podcasts already. But and of course I'm glad that he puts the mention of putting the heavy rocks in to kind of be part of the drain space. So wherever the water is draining out, that it goes over a lot of really heavy rocks. So if there's any water going out on your emergency overflow, then it's going to not dig away at the hillside because of these heavy rocks. And then the other thing is that Sepp does the thing with the monk.
So hard and such an old.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, it sounds like we're getting some alternate opinions, but so the idea is that with the monk, you're going to basically have a pipe that is, let's say, vertical. So the only way that the water can go into the pipe is kind of going over the edge of the circle of the pipe that's at the top. So it's like the top edge of the pipe is parallel with the pond surface. So the next thing about the monk, to kind of describe it, is that and this is a part that I disagree with, and of course Sepp will point at me and yell catastrophe over and over and over again, proving that I'm a fool and he's brilliant. And yet he's not here, so I get to say my thing. He likes to run the pipe for the monk really low in the dam. Now, he does mention in this chapter that if your dam gets to be really big, or if you're talking about a really large body of water, that this no longer works, that this works only on your smaller ponds or lakes. But he'll run it through the dam low. And he does, and I think we're going to talk about this in a little bit. He's got a technique that he does for this to keep the water from running along it. Yeah. So we're going to get to that in a little bit. I'm concerned that low in the pond, that the water pressure is pretty high, and that the water pressure wants to go along the pipe through the dam to the other side of the dam, and then dig a brand new channel along this pipe. Now he has a way to mitigate that, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but I agree with him that it is wise to have this pipe, but I do mine in a very different way. And I don't know, I mean, this is an okay time to talk about my different way, right? Is this?
Sure.
It's not in the book. So what I do is, so what Sepp does is that he's got this horizontal pipe low in the dam, and then there's an elbow that goes up into the pond. And then this pipe there'll be that. So it's basically a vertical pipe connected with an elbow to a horizontal pipe. And then when the water, so there's a picture on there now for the YouTube viewers of part of it, and of one, and I believe that's at the Parameter off. No, wait, that one's in Portugal, isn't it? I think that particular one is at Tamara in Portugal. But anyway, the idea is that the pipe is vertical, and then when the water level reaches the top of the pipe, it starts to go into the pipe along the edges of the pipe, at the opening of the pipe. And that determines generally the height of the water level in the pond or lake. And then one of the things that he likes to do is that if you tilt the pipe, then it gets lower and lower and lower. And so you can lower the water level in your pond or lake by doing that. And there are times when you might wanna. Now, one of the things about doing that is that if it's straight up and down, it's pretty good at keeping sticks and crap out. Pretty good. Not perfect, but your bigger sticks kind of get up there and they can't get into the pipe that way. But when your pipe starts to go down at an angle, now the sticks are like, I can get in there, and then they want to get in there and plug it all up, which is what you don't want. I mean, there's ways to mitigate that to help keep it from plugging up, but those ways usually suck. Like either those things that you've done to keep the pipe from getting plugged up now plug up, or they ice up in the winter, and all kinds of comedy comes from that.
Could you put a couple of like 45 elbows on the end of that? So as you rotate it down and it's no longer totally vertical, you could then rotate those little elbows on the end of it so that the final surface of that pipe, those elbows would be then parallel with the surface of the water to maintain that.
You could.
That might be an option.
But like, that's kind of assuming that you're going to like say, okay, I want this pond to have a water level that's like 3 feet lower than normal. And so I'm going to adjust the monk to be off to one side, and then I'm going to monkey with the elbows on the end to get it so that it's like right at the surface the correct flat way. But it's kind of like, in my experience, I kind of either want my ponds to be totally full or totally empty. And I mean, there's reasons why you want to drain the pond. It's not very often, but you know, there can be reasons. But the whole idea of like, and now I've decided to have it be 3 feet low. I don't know. I don't understand that one. I've never done that before. Like I should say, not only have I never done it because I've never set anything up to be able to do that, but it's like, I've never encountered the situation where it's like, I wish that was the case. I wish I could set it to be 3 feet low. So I don't know what the story is there with making a pond be 3 feet low. You know, maybe, is there anybody who's got any ideas? 3 feet low? Like you've got a pond, it's like, let's say it's 15 feet deep.
I'm thinking maybe you need to do some work on the dam itself, and you want the water a little lower so there's less risk that it will blow the dam out if you're having to dig on it for some reason.
Okay. I'm trying to think like, what's your reason, dude?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have experience with working on dams. So.
and the other thing is so for my systems, I would just make it so that there was the pipe that would there was the pipe part, which my pipe part is different than Sepp's Monk, but there was that, and then there was the emergency overflow. There was that, and then if I ever got the feeling like I want to drain the pond, in which case maybe your scenario comes up and it's like, I want to drain the pond and be able to work on this thing, which might be half a day. And in which case the Monk thing, it's like what you're proposing would be temporary. But for me, if I wanted to drain the pond for half a day or something like that, I had a pretty big siphon hose. And then it was like a 1.5 inch poly pipe, and I would just go put the whole thing into the pond, and then I'd put my hand over one end and pull one end over to the other side, then pull my hand off. And then it's siphoning, it's draining, and it'll just sit there and drain as long as I lit it. And when I'm like, that's good, it's 3 feet down, then I could just stop it and, stop the siphon, just pick the pipe up and go stand on the dam, and then it all drains out and the air gets in it, and it's like, and now the siphoning is over. That was it. That's the whole thing. Now, my system is that I used poly pipe, and I just would use 2 pieces. Like one piece would be an inch or 1.5 inch poly pipe, and then I would connect it to something that would be bigger poly pipe. And then the idea is that the smaller stuff would go into the pond, and then the bigger stuff would start like as I am in the dam. And so I would try to take my water from the mid-level of the water, and then I'd go to the dam, and then the pipe would go up a little bit, switch to the bigger pipe, go up a little bit more, and then start to go down again, and then carry the water going out to a point that's away from the dam. Now, the highest point in this pipe would then determine the apex of where, like the height of the water, like the pond level would be here. This is my standard pond level. So whenever there's more than that, then water would flow through the pipe at the apex. At the same time, because there's a bigger pipe connected to a smaller pipe, a siphon cannot form. There's enough air in the system so that there's not ever going to be a siphon. And whatever the level of the pond is, that water level is right there at the apex, slowly dribbling out. So that's my substitute for the Monk. And then what I also do is that I take a piece of the poly pipe, and I crimp I take a piece that's like about 18 inches long, and I crimp both ends, thus making like a big gob of air inside it. And then I just tie a rock with a 3-foot bit of twine to the intake. And I also tie this piece of poly pipe to it. So what happens is that the rock determines, like the rock's going to go to the bottom of the pond. The string is going to determine how high up the intake is above the bottom of the pond. And then the little piece of poly pipe I've attached to it is like holding it up inside the pond. Opalyn, I think if you scroll down there enough, well, maybe not. I was going to say, like, I've got images somewhere on Permies of this stuff I'm talking about that you could possibly show, but I'm not sure where it is.
I'll keep looking. I haven't been finding anything that's useful relative to what you're discussing. I've been searching.
So for my intake, I just, on the end of that poly pipe, I crimp the end of the poly pipe, and then I just drill like 100 holes in it, and then I wrap it in some stainless screen, and that's my water intake. And the point is that I'm trying to pull water from a point that's going to be really clean. It's probably not going to have a lot of stuff that's going to plug it up, because the stuff that's going to plug up your pipe is either floaters or sinkers. So I'm taking from the middle of the pond, which in the middle of winter is also not going to be ice. And then because it's not ice, then the water that's going into the next pond below is not super cold. And it's hopefully going to stay quite liquid as it goes over to the next pond and aerate and add water. The other thing is that the water that I am taking out of the pond tends to be the water that has very little oxygen in it. And so you have more oxygen in the water that's higher up in the pond. But the water that I am putting out is going to get a lot of air contact and get very oxygenated soon. It's going to hit full oxygen saturation very quickly. So I kind of feel like rather than taking air out of the system like Sepp does from the top of the pond, which already has a lot of oxygen in it, and then is going to end up through this process getting just a pinch more, instead of doing that, what I want to do is I want to take the stuff that already doesn't have a lot of oxygen in it and add a lot of oxygen to that. I end up with a lot more oxygen in my system because of that. All right.
So Paul, I just want to make sure you're taking the water from the bottom of the pond.
Trying to take it from like the middle of the pond, maybe a little low middle.
So like this sort of
yeah.
zone that I'm...
Try and type in Paul Wheaton pond. So you're doing this Google image search. I don't know, Paul Wheaton pond. Just how about Paul Wheaton pond?
What?
Yeah, that's a what I don't know.
Edible ponds.
All right.
So you're taking it from the middle of the pond, but the pipe. Is there something on the other side that controls when it lets water out? Because of course, if you stick a pipe into the middle of a pond, that will become the new top of the pond.
Well, what he was describing was that while the intake of that pipe is at the middle of the pond's water depth, the pipe is going upwards into the dam or into the bank at an incline. And then at the peak is when I believe he said you connect the larger pipe to the smaller one. And at that connection, that's the highest point of that pipe, is where the intended water level of the pond is. And then it continues out to the next pond at a downward slope with that larger pipe. So there's always some air inside that larger pipe to prevent the siphon effect. So wherever you've placed that high point in the pipe, that's where the water pressure from the pond will push the water in that smaller pipe up to that peak, and then it will start to drain out. And so assuming you don't have, a heavy rain or something that would just, overwhelm the pipe intake, that's how it would level.
Opalyn, can you type into your Google image search, Paul Wheaton pond siphon? Maybe that'll bring up the image that we're looking for here.
So Paul, do you have a angle on the side that's not in the pond, the side that's going up, so you can control it on the fly?
So, okay, let's if we there's somebody else's drawing of what I have described. But I think my drawings are in there somewhere too. But this drawing is perfectly okay. Although I would want to comment on it. Maybe we can go to one of my drawings, which are possibly less handsome. Okay, here we go. This is a great one. This one really draws the picture. So to answer your question, Katie, I have nothing controlling the amount of flow into the pipe, with the exception of the size of the pipe itself. now I designed this on Mount Spokane where we had a seasonal little dribble of water. And so it would only run during the winter, basically, winter and spring, maybe a little in the fall. It was very seasonal. And so I put this in, I designed this system. Now, did I answer your question though? Because I think you're asking, how do I control the flow?
Yes, you answered my question. This picture
Okay.
helps a lot too.
All right.
The picture is that the height is inside the wall of the dam. So you couldn't move that up and down. It's inside the dirt.
Right. Another important thing is that if there was any water in the system, like any water in the dam trying to follow the pipe, then it gets up to this high point in the dam, and then it basically the water pressure is so incredibly low that it is far less likely to try and push its way through. So I feel like it's safer and easier to deal with. Now, the thing is that you can kind of see that there's a part where the poly pipe goes into a wooden trough and it dribbles the water into the wooden trough, thus gaining a lot of oxygen. And then that water dribbles into the next pond. So it again gains a lot of oxygen. So, all right. I guess a real good thing to say is, did I describe this adequately into a podcast format to get the point across to maybe more than half of the listeners?
I think so, but what I'm thinking about is, like, I'm not sure we described what the Holzer Monk was first. I think we described what you were, your position on it. And so as long as we go back and talk about.
All right. So the Holzer Monk is a horizontal pipe. And I should say, let's start with the horizontal pipe. It's not truly horizontal. It goes a little bit downhill, but it's a horizontal pipe attached to an elbow, which is attached to a vertical pipe. And then if you just leave it vertical all the time, then the opening at the top of the pipe determines the water level of the pond. And then which is fascinating. And what Sepp says, and I believe that in this podcast, in looking at Desert Paradise, Sepp says that this opening at the top of the pipe, and that when the water hits it just right, if you've done it all correctly, then the water as it enters the pipe goes tip, 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 tip. And there's, in one of his videos, in the 3-in-1 videos, which, by the way, I should point out, we have found the people that own the copyright for the 3-in-1 video, and we have arranged for it to be sold on Permies in streaming form for, I think it's $15. And I don't know, we seem to sell like 4 or 5 a week. So the people that own the copyright on that, they're very happy that we've contacted them. And also in the Kickstarter, it was part of the early bird that one of those movies was included as part of the early bird, as one of the early bird goodies. So all right, and as long as we're talking, the Desert or Paradise movie, which Sepp owns the rights to, was our very first stretch goal, and we hit that stretch goal ages ago. I think we now have hit 12 stretch goals. But I have been in this most bizarre contact with Sepp over email, and we've made arrangements for this. And so, yeah, I'm in contact with Sepp, barely. All right. The Monk is basically a pipe with an elbow. It sticks straight up in the pond, and then it runs horizontal out to the other side of the pond. And then, of course, there's this one weird thing that you can do if you want, which is that you can take the vertical part and kind of lean it over to the side so it could go down, 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 down. And wherever it goes down to, then that defines what the new pond level is. And you could even have it go as far down as like all the way down to the bottom of the pond. So that's the Monk. Now there's a problem with that design in that at the elbow of the Monk, there can be leaks. Now he's got ways to kind of mitigate that. And then there's the other problem of like that horizontal pipe is low in the dam where there's a lot of pressure, but he's got a way to mitigate that too. Well, and I'll explore that. I'll share his stuff about that here in a moment. So have I described it adequately now?
I think so. There's a paragraph or two that I wanted to read from what Sepp wrote.
Go for it.
So the Holzer Monk, a monk is used in a fishery to drain or to regulate the water level in a pond. In a pond with a monk, the emergency drain would only be used when the monk is blocked by branches or leaves. So the emergency drain or spillway is slightly higher than the monk at its tallest level. What is a monk, you ask? It is a draw-off tap. It consists of a shaft lined by a U-shaped iron, and I think I would interpret that to be pipe. And then it gets a little too confusing to try and describe.
I was having that same problem. In fact, when I read the whole thing, I was thinking like, this is describing one of those things that are U-shaped iron. So they'll have like angle iron on the sides and possibly even the bottom. And then they'll have these blocks of wood that sit inside of that. And then it holds back the water. It's the water level is determined by these blocks of wood. Like if you take all the blocks of wood out, the water level goes down to the bottom of this U-shaped thing. But if you put all the blocks of wood in, then the water level goes way up. That's what I kind of felt like he was describing, which I would think is not the monk, but maybe he's saying that this is a different kind. That maybe he's saying that some people call that a monk, and then he goes on to describe the Holzer monk.
That makes a lot more sense, given that, yeah, that is because his question at the beginning of the paragraph that I stopped reading in is, what is a monk? So what is it generally?
Right.
And then he describes his, which has several variations or alterations to mitigate what he sees as the problem with a typical monk.
So there's a bit where he says, it is called the Holzer monk because I invented it. It can be built quite easily. I decided to use pipes made of plastic as they have less problems with freezing. So I'm doing my damnedest to have less plastic in my life, and it's hard to have less plastic. And so here he is like, I'm gonna use plastic. And it's kind of like, I wish you would do something else. Okay. To make the connection watertight, I shovel some sawdust or horse manure around the pipes. So I think he's talking about the elbow, which is able to rotate a little bit. The fibrous particles get sucked into the bushings and make the whole connection beautifully waterproof. Okay. I'm kind of thinking like, I don't know, man. But sure.
Wouldn't that
okay.
eventually rot?
But then more would come in, right? I guess that's what he's saying. I mean, eventually there gets to be a lot of muck in the bottom of the pond.
Yeah.
And so the muck kind of fills those cracks, maybe? I don't know. Okay, all right. Then comes practical tip. The horizontal drainage pipe has a smooth surface. This might lead to leaking over time. And I want to insert in here a leak like that will quickly blow out your whole dam. Like if a leak like that gets started, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger really fast. And then your whole body of water goes downhill to visit the neighbors.
I was thinking that was a pretty huge understatement.
Yeah, I'm going to go with understatement here, but continuing with his words, to prevent this, I recommend giving the pipe a rough surface that fully connects with the surrounding earth. The best way to achieve this is by wrapping the pipe with stripes of builder's fleece or jute. In order for them to stick to the pipe, I soak them with rapid setting cement. This system works well and fully connects the pipe with the surrounding soil, thereby creating a long-term, fully watertight drainage pipe. Okay, so basically what he's going to do is make that surface rough. And I think some of the images kind of show that, like his drawings show that on page 71, that little bit of artwork there kind of shows it being rough. And as long as it's rough, it is way less likely for water to start running along that edge.
I have an analogy.
Okay.
It's similar to when a person breaks their leg and they go to the doctor and they get a cast. So the material that he's talking about is like wrapping a cast around this, only he's intentionally making it lumpy and bumpy and uneven so that it can integrate with the key in the dam and the whole dam, and not have a slick surface for water to run along.
Right. So I cannot think of a better way to do it, although I do, of course, wish that he would not use plastic, which is so slick to begin with. I also kind of feel like you're begging for trouble by having it that low in the dam. And I wish he wouldn't use cement, which has like environmental problems, although, you know, you can make your own cement. Let's pretend that he did. But I think he's mitigated it pretty thoroughly. He's mitigated the concerns quite thoroughly there. I think that this, I believe it works very well, not only because it works in my head, but also because it's Sepp. And so, all right, the next bit, the Holzer Monk can also be used to clean a pond. I connect a fire hose or a flexible pipe to the vertical pipe. Because of the height difference, there is low pressure in the system, and I can use the fire hose like a vacuum cleaner to fish out leaves, algae, or small plants. So I've heard him describe this many times, and I can't help but think that he just has lots of fun doing it. But one of the reasons why you would want to drain a pond, and with me using my siphon system, I can do this as well. But when he talks about all of the rocks coming into the pond and how he's trying to, and he plants a lot of plants between those, I mean, what he's trying to do is he's trying to make it so that there's less silt and stuff building up in the pond, because ponds have a tendency to just fill with silt and stuff, and then they're not a pond anymore. It's a flat spot on your land. And so you know, a lot of people will dredge their ponds periodically, like every 20 years or so, you got to dredge your pond. And there's all kinds of interesting ways to go about, you know, there should be some pretty cool YouTube videos of people. I've never seen a YouTube video of somebody dredging their pond, but surely there are some. But that's a task that used to need to be done. And I've seen pictures of different kinds of dredges that people have created in order to be able to dredge their pond. Some people would use horses to dredge their pond. Fascinating topic. But yeah, if you don't do it, and then of course what you dig out of the bottom of your pond is usually extremely nutrient rich, just really great stuff to put on your gardens. But the alternative would be that you could kind of use the Monk like a vacuum cleaner or a siphon to kind of do that. And he kind of describes a little bit of like having something that'll catch all of that later on. All right. Moving along, I've actually elected. There is this thing about alignment to existing winds, but I kind of feel like he must be building ponds in places where they have a prevalent wind, but he likes to make them go. He likes to make ponds and lakes be long and skinnier, maybe oval shaped, and they go along the direction of the prevailing wind. And then he likes to make it so that there's a lot of trees on the sides. So that way, as the prevailing wind approaches the pond, it'll start to go faster between the trees, and there'll be more little ripples on the water, thus having more oxygen exchange. So he's got a segment in here about that, which I'm electing to not read. He then talks about the deep zones, where if you have a deep pond, in fact, for the Krameterhof, I remember he has a mix of ponds. He has deep, cold ponds and shallow, warm ponds. And then when he has the system of how the water that comes out of a cold pond, he makes sure that it goes into the next cold pond. And the water that comes out of a warm pond goes into a warm pond. He doesn't mix the two, which I think is kind of fascinating. So he talks a bit about that. One of the things he doesn't mention is that, he does mention how in warm weather, the temperature of ponds tends to stratify. So in warm weather, the water at the top of the pond generally stays fairly warm. And I'm sure we've all experienced that. You go swimming in a deep lake somewhere, and as long as you're swimming on the surface, the water is very comfortable. But you swim down like even 5 feet, and it's like, wow, suddenly it got really cold. True? You guys have experienced this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So large lakes and ponds, the water will tend to stratify because the warmer water will rise and the colder water will sink. And so the water that's cold and low tends to run out of oxygen quickly and tends to stay low. And then the water at the surface that gets warm tends to be the water that has the most oxygen. However, when winter time rolls around, and he didn't mention that in the book, and I was kind of like thinking he's going to say it, in the winter, when your surfaces want to freeze because it's freezing temperatures, in a deep pond, it's like, okay, that stuff that's deep is like 45 degrees. And then the stuff at the surface is now 32, and it's got these thoughts about freezing. Well, the 32 stuff sinks and the 45 stuff rises. And in the end, the water, because the ground underneath that's 20 feet down is holding at a constant 45 degrees. So in the end, on a deep pond or a deep lake, the surface of the water, in certain regions, like here in Montana, let's say, if it's a deep pond, the surface of the water will not freeze. I mean, it might get to be 10 below, but it still doesn't freeze. And it's because of that. It's because it's deep. Now, if it was shallow, like a mud puddle, frozen solid, baby. But or a shallower pond, frozen solid, or a nice thick sheet of ice, something you can go ice skating on. But this deeper stuff, no skating for you. I'm sure you guys have, well, maybe not all of you. Maybe Opalyn has observed this. Katie and Mark are in warmer climates. maybe you've never even seen naturally occurring ice. All the ice is at the restaurant.
Fortunately, I lived out in the Midwest for most of my life, so no, I'm aware of what ice and even snow is, although I don't see it recently.
Okay, Katie?
When the ice at the restaurant, like when the cup is really, really deep. Oh wait, no, no. No, I have lived in places where there was snow, and I did notice like the way that the deeper puddles and the shallower puddles would definitely be different. I had a question about fish. Are we skipping the fish? But I didn't understand what he said about fish.
All right, I'm okay. What page are you on? What page do you want to talk about?
The same page. My page numbers are set differently than your guys' page numbers because of the digital version. But it's the page that says practical. And he says that he can connect a basin. He says, I can connect a basin to the drainage pipe on the outside of the dam, and the fish swim there of their own accord. And that just blows my mind, because why do the fish swim through the pipe? That seems terrible, bad plan for fish, but they do. So I don't understand. Do you know why the fish do that?
He's saying that the fish swim through the pipe? What?
Maybe not. I don't understand.
Well, he did have a mention about another pipe over the first one with slits, and to keep the fish out of that monk pipe, but it would still allow sufficient, flow of water.
So that's at the top of page 73 for the print version, and the subheading is the pipe in pipe system. Every monk needs a safety device to prevent fish from swimming through it. So he puts a larger diameter pipe over the monk pipe with some slits and spacers and things so that the fish can't go through and the water can.
This is the page before that. I think he must not have the top on it, because I just read exactly what he said, and he seemed to be saying that the fish like to go through that pipe.
I remember on one of the videos I've watched, he talks about like siphoning or monking his fish to lower ponds when he like drains them. So maybe it's a difference between like standard everyday use and then, hey, let's clean the pond monk use.
Maybe,
yeah, I think
maybe it's like Disneyland for fish. Like they're going to go on a water ride. There you go, fish. It's time to party.
Maybe he makes it uncomfortably low amount of water in the pond, and so they're like, anything's better than this. Let's go through this pipe.
I do not see. I kind of believe that the monk on the downhill side is a little above. In fact, if you look at the image on page 71, it's like a little above the next pond. So that way the water can kind of go dribbly, dribbly, dribbly into the pond and thus, aerate it. And then now I imagine that, I can't find what you're saying he's saying, but I can imagine that what's going on is that the fish are gathering at that point that the water's coming in, because that's like a whole lot of extra oxygen. That's my guess. I wish you had page numbers and stuff and could tell me where you're reading.
Do you see the box that says practical tip right before the page, right before the section titled pipe and pipe system?
Yes, I do see that.
It is the paragraph right above, at maybe 2 sentences right above practical tip.
Okay. Let's see. I read that part, the part about
I can
sawdust
connect a basin to the drainage pipe on the outside of the dam, and the fish swim there of their own accord. This is a good alternative to using nets for fishing. So I think that's just on the lower pond. The fish are swimming up to that outlet. Like Paul was saying, it's highly oxygenated. So
found it. The Holzer Monk offers other advantages as well, especially in fishery. Young fish and crayfish can easily adjust to the slower draining of a pond and do not get harmed in the process. I can connect a basin to the drainage pipe on the outside of the dam, and the fish swim there of their own accord.
I get it. So
It's
I
the
have
alternative to using nets for fishing.
My experience is working with large, like civil engineering dams, and you have to give the fish a lot of water flow to encourage them to swim upstream. Like if you don't have enough water flow, like significant water flow, the fish won't find the fish ladder. So, but the fish are attracted to where the water is entering the lower pond from the upper pond. And they'll come there and you'll be able to fish right around the outlet of your monk.
Okay. I kind of feel like what he's talking about here is when he drains the system with the vacuum cleaner technique. And then he's trying to say something about like you're draining the pond slowly, which gives the fish and crayfish lots of opportunity to move to deeper spots so that they, you know, don't run out of water. And then he's also talking about how he can set things up on the output of the pipe to collect the muck or whatever it is he's vacuuming, possibly even set up a net to catch certain things. And then it seems like he's also talking about at that same spot, the other fish that are in the downhill side are gathering of their own accord, which I think is what you're talking about, Opalyn, which is what you're suggesting. Yeah.
So you end up with the bigger fish in the upper pond in much shallower water. So they're easier to catch because they have less places to hide. And the fish in the lower pond being attracted to that monk outlet / pond inlet.
Yes. Yes. So Katie, does this help at all? Are we helping?
Yes, thank you. I thought I needed more explanation of that statement because it didn't. Thank you.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. All right. All right. Now I was bebopping through the whole thing about the deep zones. Then he's talking about the banks and his use of large rocks to hold heat. And then he's got vegetation next to the ponds, next to the lake. And then I wanted to pick back up again on the economy of water landscapes. And now, is there anything before that any of you guys have marked and want to talk about? Because I'm looking at page 80 now.
I have one thing.
Okay.
True to Sepp form and how 4 of his 8 principles are observing.
Yes.
On page 73, he talks about observations by the stream. And there's some really interesting stuff in there, but to sum it up, he talks about how water moves in 3 different ways. It meanders like a snake, waves form because of wind or airflow, and when the meanders and the waves meet, the water spirals and swirls. So that's how you get different things going on in the water and aeration and all the different lovely things that happen in a stream. And so he suggests that you sit down and watch a stream for a while.
That's true. And he does advocate that a lot. Like the you know, you got to read from the book of nature, and observation is 4 of the 8 permaculture principles according to Sepp. I think Mollison and Holmgren have 12, and they're all different. And also one of the 8 for Sepp's is profit, and which I'm not sure. Like there's obtain a yield, which is one of the 12 from Holmgren and Mollison, but it's like it's not so blatantly said as profit. And so this next bit, Holzer does dive deep into profit, which I kind of feel like is pretty courageous. I kind of have a weird space in this, but I do kind of feel like if we permit profit to be a motivator in the world of permaculture, I think permaculture gets adopted more. And then at the same time, I kind of feel like while it's good to talk about things like the thing I wrote about how do we get permaculture apples into Safeway? I think what's a much better, a higher up permaculture thing to pursue would be gratitude. And I kind of feel like I powerfully advocate for gratitude. And I kind of feel like people, and it's, I want to hear back from all three of you about this statement I'm about to make. People they cannot contemplate gratitude until after they are satisfied that they can make a profit. Does that seem legit? Like, I don't think people can make the leap from never heard of permaculture directly to gratitude. Most people need to understand how there's a profit to permaculture first. And then when they deep dive on that and are satisfied, and they've traveled that path a long time, a certain amount, it's like gratitude is like level 7, level 8, something like that. And people, when they're very first hearing the word permaculture, they're more like level 1 or 2. Is that all right?
I'm thinking that part of it is gratitude is being comfortable with what you have versus the striving effect, right? So like you've mentioned previously, that Gert, makes enough food for what is needed, has enough surplus for little expenses here and there as needed, that she could put more time and effort and energy into making more food or making it more profitable, but then there's all that work involved. And so I think that my impression would be that a lot of people, at least in the United States, are taught or focus on you've got to make the most profit or the most money. And it's only once somebody gets beyond that, keeping up with the Joneses mentality, that it's like, I'm comfortable with what I have. And like, I've been going through that process myself of needing less and less and reaching that point of, man, I really don't need to work anymore because I'm already comfortable with what I have and I can survive off of what I have, right? And so people having maybe a comfort level or not, being able to get rid of the fear of, well, if you're not making as much money as possible, how will you survive? In that classic, what if something happens, and therefore I'll never risk anything because there's a chance that something could happen and I don't know the answer to that. And I think Gert sort of gets beyond that and saying, I only need a couple thousand a year for taxes and food and stuff I don't make, and being able to do well enough with less.
I believe you are confirming what I'm saying. You're validating what I'm saying. Does that seem legit?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Opalyn.
So since we've had some conversation, remind me of your position.
So what I'm saying is that I think most people cannot contemplate Gert until they have first, like when they first hear about permaculture, they first need to know that people can make money with permaculture. They profit from permaculture. And until they are satisfied that they can profit with permaculture, most people cannot contemplate gratitude.
I would agree with that. Absolutely. I know that a lot of people are very tied to their work, and not to get sexist, but males tend to identify more with their work as their being, and women tend to identify with their relationships. And so without that identity, and money has been very strongly tied to work. So if they're not making money in permaculture, then it's not their work and it's not their identity. And so I think that is a big part of it. And for me, like I was partially living a girt-ish lifestyle for nearly a decade where like I would I don't know how much I want to go into it, but it's a lot of emotions are swirling because life has changed for me. But you know, realizing like I buy most of my clothes at the Goodwill outlet because I can either improve it and make it amazing, or I can use it as is. Like I find cashmere sweaters and wool sweaters there that are perfect as they are, or can be transformed into something that I really want. Like I made my own long silk skirt out of men's silk ties that I would acquire because that's what I wanted. So
all right, you have confirmed what I've said
yes,
for a variety of reasons, for a buffet of reasons. And you've even kind of lived that path a little bit, like been there, done that a little bit.
yeah.
Fair? Okay. Katie.
Well, it depends.
Ooh, she beat us
Classic
all.
answer.
She had the answer to all questions. Damn. I should have been
42.
thinking of that.
I think if you have a chunk of money in the bank, you might give girding a try without believing that it would be like without believing it would be profitable. Maybe you believe it would be self-sustaining but not profitable, but you feel comfortable because you have a buffer. Or maybe you have an alternative stream that is not permaculture that you're like, well, I have this other way I work this 5 hours a week or whatever it is, and you feel like, okay, that would be enough. And maybe you've already lived a little bit on a lower budget, not permaculture necessarily, but low budget. And so you're like, okay, I can try this. I can see if it works. And then only when they feel like I can actually get my own food most of the time, like you maybe you surprise yourself and you're like, well, actually I could, then you might change your feeling about how much you need alternative streams of income, or how much you need to have the buffer, and then relax your feeling of insecurity or something. But I think that if there might be people who they have to have that profit, and then there might be people who have another way of feeling safe, and then there are some people who just jump overboard. I don't know.
So I think you're also saying, if I qualify it by saying most people, then you are endorsing what I am saying. Fair?
Sure.
It depends. Okay. I want to state that I want to take a look at Jeff Lawton for just a moment. And so what Jeff Lawton's going to talk about is going to be quite different from what Sepp talks about, while it's simultaneously being exactly the same. And I believe that Jeff Lawton, I've seen some of his videos where he's answering questions or he's presenting a little permaculture tidbit or whatever. And it's like, and I watch them and I kind of feel like I can't argue with that. And it's like, I think he's doing a lovely job putting out these very professional videos, answering important questions. And I have not taken his online PDC, but I have heard a lot of good things about it. And my understanding is that it has evolved year after year, and it's very good. And I kind of get the idea that the material that he presents is extremely polished, etc. And in I was recording a podcast with him, and the topic of like money came up and profit. And he said a bunch of stuff which I just couldn't wrap my head around. I don't know if you guys either remember this podcast or are familiar with Jeff's philosophies on money, but it kind of sounded like don't pursue money. And I was just so I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I agree with what Jeff says for so many things. And he and I used to have a debate about swales. And then we recorded a podcast where he said he changed his mind and he agrees with me now. And so it's like, good. Let's stop recording all future podcasts now. Paul's right, Jeff's wrong. Good. Let's be done. So, but Jeff is doing a magnificent job of teaching permaculture, and very eloquently. And he's really polished his message. I like his videos now a lot. I think that they're great. Okay, but when it comes to this money thing, I have not heard him ever say anything else about money other than what he was saying in that podcast of mine. So I'm just gonna say, like, I am confused about Jeff's position on profit, on monetary profit. It didn't, I couldn't get my head wrapped around it. I'm sure it's fantastic and I'm just too dumb or something. All right, do any of you remember this podcast with Jeff and what he was saying?
I haven't listened to that podcast yet, but I did take Jeff Lawton's online permaculture class, and I read a lot of student reviews from people who went to his place, and it seems, my impression, I'll put it that way, is that he wants people to come to his place and pay him money for the privilege of even being an intern there. I'm not sure. I know that that's the case for his coursework, and it's pretty spendy.
Right.
So I think there's here's what I'll say about money being very different from here's what I'll do about money, because because the permaculture online course, I believe I paid more than you charged for your in-person course that you're offering this summer. And it was all online. There was no FaceTime, there was no housing, there was no food, like there were none of the costs. And he's made all of his videos, so he doesn't even have to invest the time it takes to teach the class. Like, he's made the video, and so year after year, he can play the same video. And there's a lot of work that goes into it, and there's a whole team of TAs, and I don't know if they get reimbursed for any of their time or effort.
I'm pretty sure that they get paid nothing, that they are volunteers.
Yeah, that was my impression, but I don't have any information one way or the other. And I know that early on in the class, so I took mine, the 2019 class actually got a late start, and we started in January. And then he extended the class because of COVID. We started in January of 19, must have. Anyways, I know that COVID allowed all of us an extension to finish our project. And so it seems like he talks about a money motivation being a bad thing, and that I can understand. Because if you're like, the problem with corporate America, and I won't say capitalism because it's not anymore, in my opinion, corporate America is money focused. And when you're money focused, you make different choices than when you have a balanced focused, or, so what is the goal? And money has to be a part of it, in my opinion. But to have it be the priority is problematic.
Okay.
I was going to say the priority too, that if people go into things saying my number one priority with my job or permaculture or whatever is making a profit, then you're going to potentially cut corners in other areas. Like, well, it's cheaper and a time saver if I just spray the Roundup over here versus doing this other stuff that maybe takes more time or effort, or costs me more, even though it's more permaculturally, So I think it's just a matter of balancing the priorities. You can still make money. It's just that it's not your number one overwhelming goal.
I think if you see your own self and human life as part of a system, and you take a systems approach, if you look at the inputs and outputs in your life, some of them, the way that our current system seems to be in the US anyway, a lot of them need to be money systems. Like you can't, in a lot of cases, you can't get the car for trade. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you can't get the health insurance. Sometimes you can't get whatever it is. There are a lot of things that are difficult without a money system. And so it does need to be part of the flow of resources. And I think it needs to balance.
So what I hear is that no one has a recollection of this conversation I had with Jeff, but it sounds like Opalyn has a recollection that Jeff did seem to advocate something about do not pursue profit, do not pursue the coin. And I feel like part of what Opalyn was saying, I agree with. Like, I kind of feel like pursuit of money is not the problem. It's like compromising values is the problem. Like, I am totally willing to shoot 7 people in the head to get $100. That's a problem. That's very rude, and it's illegal. So it's like I kind of feel like the problem wasn't the pursuit of the $100. The problem was the willingness to do something unethical, unkind, rude, or something to shit upon the environment. And it's kind of like I think that we got to have some values in there somewhere. And I kind of feel like the values, it's not about the pursuit of the money that's the problem. It's the pursuit or lack of pursuit of the values. Or even some people, their pursuit is like anti-environment. They intentionally do things to pollute in a big way because they know it will piss off the people that are working hard to make things better. And they kind of find comedy in that. And so, all right. As far as Jeff getting lots of money, I kind of feel like good for him. I don't know what he charges now, but I understand it's like $1,200 or $1,400 to take the course. And I know that there's like 1,000 people a year taking it, so that's over $1 million. And I kind of think that if he's gotten to the point where he just takes the $1 million and puts it in his pocket, and he just has to show up for this class, so he's got this $1 million a year job, I kind of feel like, way to go, buddy. Someone's making big coin with permaculture. Good job. I want to pat him on the back. I don't think he should be ashamed of that, and I don't think we should shame him for that. I don't know what he went through to get to that point. I don't know if he has massive expenses. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it's the philosophy of HHH, right? Now, have you all heard of HHH?
I've only heard of 4-H, as in the fair.
Okay, so in some of my podcasts in the past, I talk about HH because someone once there's been a couple of different things that have come up that have been like, okay, Paul, I'm going to buy this thing from you. I'm going to support your Kickstarter for $100, but now I need to know that if you profit $100, I need to know what you're going to do with that money. And my response is always the same. HHH. I say, I promise, I swear, I am going to spend that money only on hookers, heroin, and hooch. That's it. It'll be mostly on hookers, but surely there'll be heroin. Actually, I've never done any drugs in my life, but I'll spend it on heroin anyway. just to prove that it's my fucking money. Get the fuck away from my money. The key is that whatever a person does with their money after they somehow earned it, it's up to them. They get to spend it on whatever they want. I would like to think that Jeff's probably turning around and dumping that money into all kinds of permaculture stuff. But I could be wrong. I mean, maybe he is going out and he's going to Vegas with it or something. I don't know. But that's his business. I wish to encourage all permaculture people to make oodles of money and to not be beholden to somebody else wanting to know what you're going to spend that money on, or, you know, what's your profit margin or whatever. And that's kind of my point, because he was saying something about money, which I just simply didn't understand. But my values are that my values, which I do understand, is that I want him to make gobs of money. If he wants to make lots of money, go for it, man. Gert doesn't feel like doing what Jeff does. And what Jeff's doing is hard. And I think he's doing a good job. And if he's doing a good job with permaculture, I hope he gets a lot of coin for it. So all that said, oh geez, is this it right here?
That's it.
It's $1,500.
And that's saving $200 because you're paying it all up front.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if my guess is that 1,000 people a year are paying him $1,500 for that. And it's like, and now here, let me ask you a different question. Now, you probably didn't pay you probably paid less than $1,500 when you took it a couple of years ago. But is it worth it?
It's a massive amount of information. And I knew for me that trying to incorporate even half of 72 hours of instruction in 10 days, 13, 14 days, I wouldn't retain very much of it at all, which is why I looked for an online program. It's a fabulous amount of information. All of his videos are like the well-polished YouTube videos, not the, oh, I'm just sitting around having a chat with some buddies.
Like the podcast we're about to put out.
There's value to that, but you're not asking $1,500 for it either.
Well, that's true.
They've put a lot of time and effort. Like he's on got a chalkboard, draws beautifully and articulately, and you know, it's like it puts you into the student mindset of like, here's an instructor at the front of the class and he's got his big desk and the chalkboard. And so it very much harkens to that studiousness for me. And the focus, and the videos are really digestible chunks. It is designed on like a 28-week schedule. And then there's time after that for you to work on your design, or at least that's how it was set up for me. And they have a really phenomenal, like step-by-step final design exercise where you like, here's information about your site that you've gathered, and here's the climate information. Like, just really, they have it really well figured out. And so,
so you're saying, yes, it was worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so as a friend or a family member, like I can take it again for half that price, or at least they may have closed that part of the early registration. But so can a family member.
Cool.
As a former student, I have sort of a half price ticket to get into the course again if I want to take it again, because the material isn't available to you forever, like the classes.
Okay. All right.
They're behind the paywall.
By my values, I encourage him. I endorse that price if people are willing to pay it. I mean, hell, if he wanted to do it for $10,000 a pop, and he only had 50 students a year, I would endorse that too. Hell, if he only had 3 students a year, I would endorse that price. I mean, I kind of feel like he gets to set his price to whatever he wants, and if it's worth it, he's done well. He is wise, and so by my values, I support what he's doing. Now, the question on the table I'm trying to get to, because I want to get to Sepp's thing here, Sepp's chapter, is that he said some stuff about, like, it sounded to me like he was trying to say, like, we should not pursue profit. And whatever it was that he said, I feel like I shouldn't say that because I didn't understand what he was saying. And I elected to move on to the next topic rather than explore it, because it's like, I felt like exploration would be futile. I wasn't understanding what he was even saying. It's like, I don't have the chops or something to have this conversation with him. So I moved on. This leads me to this chapter that's this bit of that Sepp wrote. So again, Desert of Paradise by Sepp Holzer, page 80, the economy of water landscapes. I am often asked what proportion of a property should be given to water, and how big does a water retention space need to be in order to harmonize the hydrological balance. Each landscape is different, and so is the climate, the soil, and the geological conditions. Annual rainfall needs to be factored in as well. For people wanting to go all the way to full restoration, I would estimate about 10% of the land. Yet, depending on the landscape and the desired end use, possibly more. Upon hearing this, many landowners and farmers protest that they also need to earn money from the land. I take this very seriously, as every farmer should be able to live with and off the land, should be able to feed his or her family, and make enough money without needing to be dependent on subsidies and other aids. However, I'd like to point out that water landscapes are economically sound. People can actually make more money from them than by cultivating the land. And it's also less work. Knowing how to do this is the answer. The Kramerhof shows just how productive a water landscape is. The fiscal authorities have determined the assessed tax value of the land to be 10 times higher than what it used to be. That might just be Sepp complaining about taxes. The projects in Spain and Portugal yield more vegetables from the terraced banks than the whole properties used to before conversion, with less work and at lower costs. A water retention space ensures economic success as it increases the fertility of the whole area. The balance of accounts gets even better when the water itself is used as space for cultivation. By thinking creatively and flexibly, huge gains can be achieved. Everyone can decide for themselves how intensively they want to use a water landscape. A full-time farmer probably would like to produce as much as possible in and on the water as well as around it. There's no contradiction in making good money and protecting the environment at the same time. Quite the opposite. Farmers need a healthy surrounding in order to grow abundant crops, so it's in their best interest to protect nature. Okay. The thing I appreciate is that Sepp, advocates having a strong focus on profit. Go out there and make epic coin using permaculture techniques. which I think might be different from Jeff Lawton's, if I were to be able to understand what Jeff Lawton was advocating. I suspect it is. But the next thing, of course, is that he's starting to advocate a landscape rich in water, and he gets a lot of people saying, you know, they're basically saying that it's crazy, they can't do it because that'll cut into their cash flow. And then Sepp's response is, no, it'll improve your cash flow. Okay, I just loved sharing this bit, because I think in all the world of permaculture, there's so many people that are like, permaculture is about taking on a vow of poverty. Man, look how young I look there. That's 2009. But Sepp, this is when I very first met Sepp. At this moment, I had known Sepp about 3 minutes. And somehow he just couldn't stop going on about how huge I was. And at this point, he's willing to say huge as in tall. Later, he had to point out how fat I was.
Sepp looks like he's 8 feet tall there.
Yeah. So he kept going on. I mean, he couldn't stop talking about how tall I was. And I'm kind of like, dude, I want to talk about ponds and stuff. And all he could focus on was how tall I was. And so we took this little picture, and he just, look at how happy he is. He just thought this was the coolest thing in the world, to take a picture where I'm kind of squatting down a little bit next to him. And it's like, you know, pleasing Sepp turned out to be pretty easy. And we were besties ever since.
So how tall are you actually compared to each other?
Well, I'm 6'6". And Mark, aren't you 6'7"?
I'm 6'6" as well.
Okay, all right. So we are the same height. Okay. I don't know how tall he is. I mean, it's until people start kind of getting close to how tall I am, I kind of I can't tell. Like, I had a guy, he was here at Wheaton Labs, and he's a relatively famous dude. And I'd known him for years. And then he was telling me about how he was feeling really low. And then he said it's because of his height. What's wrong with your height? It seems fine. And apparently he's short. And so I kind of needed him to stand next to somebody else. And yeah, he wasn't as tall as this other person standing next to him. And apparently it was kind of like a thing. It was like it was kind of making him feel down a lot. And I didn't notice. He seemed like the same height as everybody else. I mean, Mark, I'm saying an observation. I mean, like, does that happen to you?
I've had a lot of people who say, golly, I wish I was as tall as you. And my response to them is, you say that up until you have to buy clothes, which you can't buy at a regular store. When you try to fit in a car, and half the models you don't fit into, like I've tried sitting in a Corvette, for example, I literally can't close the door, because by the time my legs are in there, they're up around the steering wheel.
How about planes?
Yeah, planes. I hate flying. The only time when I can afford to do the business class and spend a couple $100 extra so I actually have a seat that fits, that's okay. But yeah, it's literally painful. Yeah, with the seat back up, my knees are pressed tight against the other seat. There's no getting around it. So yeah, I would say maybe 6'2" would be a nice balance. I think in the United States, at least, the average height for men is 5'10", and for women is 5'6" is the average height.
Okay. I know. So I'm going to out Katie. Katie had to get didn't we have to get you something you got something for your chair, like to put at your feet during the PDC, right? because like your legs were hurting on our
Yeah,
regular
so
chairs.
I'm not tall. Nope. I bought I bought special shoes. It was really fun actually, but I got these tall shoes. I love the tall shoes because when I wear the 6-inch shoes, I'm normal height. And people do give you a hard time for being short, even as a
Do they?
woman, and people ostensibly don't really care if the woman is short. They still make comments about like, oh, how short you are on a pretty regular basis, which is kind of surprising because it doesn't really seem to matter that much. I mean, it's annoying to buy clothes short or tall, but I think most people have trouble buying clothes if you don't happen to fit, if you don't happen to be very much like that plastic model in the store, then the
Mm.
clothes pretty much don't fit you. So like, people of all heights can have trouble with the clothes because they're just made for that very
Yeah. A 12-year-old boy, I think, is what most clothes are based off of.
I did
someone
not
who looks
notice.
like that model.
I did not notice that you were shorter than other women until you had said something like the
Ah,
chairs are making me uncomfortable, and then it's like, what? Why are the chairs making you what are they doing? They got, you know, does yours have a sliver in it or something? It's a wood chair, you know, and it's like then you explain it to me, and it's like, okay. Going back to Mark.
it kind
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have something more, Katie? Katie, you have more?
oh, sorry. It cuts off the circulation in your legs. But if you are short
Yes.
and you go to Japan, you can be normal height.
I have a buddy who lived in Japan for a number of years, and he's, I think, around 6'2", and all their buildings are designed around an average shorter person. So he had a tough time like going up and down stairs because the stairwells are really, really tight. So he'd have to hunch over going to get up and down without hitting his head on a lot of stuff there. So he noticed it a lot.
Ooh,
and definitely
okay.
stood out there.
So another thing about height, and this is stupid, we should be talking about Sepp Holzer's stuff, but Sepp Holzer made it happen. He made this conversation happen. And I remember a woman explaining to me how I am not sexy tall, I am freaky tall. Sexy tall is like 6'2", 6'3". And so I don't know if you've had any, so I don't know, I just kind of assume that there's things about me that are too weird, and I just kind of stay out of the general market, I guess. But I'm tired of, I don't know, that space.
I think there can be a significant difference in height can sort of stand out as well. Yeah, years ago there was actually a tall club international that tall people get together, and I was one of the shorter guys in that club.
Wow.
We had a couple people that were 7 foot plus, and most of the guys were like 6'8" to 6'10", and most of the women, like the minimum height to be in the club that they have set is 6'2" for men and 5'10" for women, which supposedly 1% of the population is above that height. And so, yeah, I think there was only one guy shorter than me in that out of like say 15 or 20. And there was a woman who was actually taller than me at 6'8". And I ended up marrying her.
Oh my.
So talk about standing out. Yeah, and you go to the mall, and yeah, everybody stares.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, I'm used to people staring. I'm used to being a freak show wherever I go. But all right. That's probably too much about being tall. Too much or not being tall. Let's go back to Sepp, and the thing I really wanted to talk about was the whole profit thing. And at the same time, you know, Sepp's trying to talk about adding water to landscape, and he's getting a bunch of pushback because people are concerned about profit. And then he makes I believe, a strong point. And I kind of feel like there's a lot of people that are farmers and they're struggling to get by. And if the permaculture message is like, hey man, you shouldn't be like all stressing about money and stuff. Like money is wrong. Money is like not the right thing, you know? You should be like chilling and not, being so money focused. I feel like that doesn't help to get the point across. And this kind of comes back to my thing about girding it. I kind of feel like we can't talk about girding it until people have been thoroughly convinced that they could profit from permaculture. And the whole thing about like, hey man, don't worry about it, kind of makes it so that permaculture becomes less substantial, less real. It becomes less. It becomes silly. It becomes something that is, for people to contemplate, but not for anybody to do. Is this? Am I exaggerating?
No, I think that's very true. I think people have to see it as a real option that would work financially in their life.
I think there's some complexing factors in, like we were talking earlier about how any single focus is a problem. I don't personally know a lot of farmers, but I have lived in a farming region, and so I hear a lot of stories. And they are not always dollar focused, but it's still a single focus in bushels per acre of whatever they're growing. And I can totally understand what you want me to put a water retention landscape in the middle of, over 10% of my land, and then that's going to drop my total production. And they're barely hanging on because they don't do things in alignment with nature. They fight against nature to get that gold ribbon, blue ribbon of most bushels per acre. So once you start down the path of chemicals for bugs, and then you need one for weeds, and then you need one for fungus, and then you need one for something else, and then you need one to kill all the wheat on the same day so that you can harvest easily. Like once you start using unnatural things to manage, it becomes a perpetual motion wheel or a hamster ball that you can't get out of, or it's much harder to get out of.
I agree. But at the same time, I kind of feel like I wish to somehow lay out a plan for those same farmers where if they do embrace water in their landscape without the toxins, that they'll profit more. And I believe that a big part of Sepp's book is persuasive in that space. This very book we're reviewing, Desert or Paradise. All right. There's
definitely a process that you have to go through to get from point A to point B there. And as far as the profit part of it too, could it also be when it comes to the fair share principle in permaculture, that some people take that as, oh, you can't be making money, that's against the third principle, but that's not really, that's how you interpret it, right? You can still make a profit and make a living at something without it being the overwhelming, like, I'm going to make as much profit as possible no matter who I harm or what I harm, right? It's a balance.
Well, okay, so I want to say there's many schools of thought under the permaculture umbrella. And as much as Bill Mollison never said fair share, David Holmgren did. And so there's clearly a lot of people who embrace fair share as the third ethic. And I believe that there was the original third ethic had something to do with population control. Then it transformed into return of surplus to the first two. Somebody came up with future share, And I see that Permaculture magazine has embraced that. So earth care, people care, future care. And I really like the future care. And I also kind of believe that, you know, shouldn't we be thinking about how to expand? And this came up a few years ago. I don't know if any of you guys saw the PDC video of the video of the PDC that we filmed here in 2017.
I've been watching them.
Maybe you saw that. Oh, okay, all right. And so there came a point where people, some of the students in the class, not all of them, but a few, were advocating, were demanding that I change the curriculum of the course, even though they've never taken a PDC before.
I remember
because
that.
they wanted it. Okay. And I kind of put it out there to say, like, okay, is it okay to say, would it be fair to say that I am, me personally, and with embracing all of the arrogance I can muster, that I am like one of the top 10 permaculture people in the world? Is that, I mean, I know that the three of you might say yes, but does that seem fair? Is that, like, would more people savvy about permaculture say it's true than people that would say that it's false?
I have a hard time
Actually, I have a
judging
place
that
I wanna
when
go
you
after
put
this.
people like Art Ludwig and Miss Sanubo, I'm gonna say his name wrong, Fukuoka.
Okay, Fukuoka has died. Fukuoka's
Yeah.
died. Toby Hemingway has died. So of living people, I mean, what I want to do is I would say, let's pretend for a moment that I'm in the top 10. And the
Sure.
reason is the reason why I want to try and say that is because it's like, all right, I wanna grow permaculture. I mean, like, I want permaculture to get better. I want there to be more substance, but at the same time, I kind of understand we can't just, like, you know, have everybody doing it all at once. It'll go in so many different directions. But, you know, can I propose an area of growth? I mean, I can clearly do something where it's like, I believe a thing, and I'm not necessarily saying it's permaculture, but I like to say it's permaculture, and I can do that all I want. Everybody can do that all they want. But then it's kind of like, okay, when it comes to the official definition of permaculture, I don't feel like I have the authority to change the official definition of permaculture. But as a person who may be in the top 10, maybe I can suggest growth, suggest change, and that might possibly be acceptable. And I kind of feel like, don't we want to change? Don't we want to get better? Don't we want a richer, more magnificent, more beautiful permaculture? And of course, you know, if it's in my hands, there's a lot of people that'll scream because they're certain I'll fuck it all up. And I don't know, maybe I will. And so I shouldn't. But it's kind of like the whole concept of girding it, for example. I think girding it is a lovely addition to the greater permaculture community. Fair?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So now I can't remember why I wanted to make this point.
Well, you had people in the permaculture class that were asking you to change something.
True. And but really the thing I brought up was like, and in that particular case, they wanted us to not film, because we were doing that live PDC and we were doing it,
Right.
you know, where we were sharing the video and taking the video, and they wanted us to not film the talent night. And when I first took the PDC, when I first took my first PDC, I didn't know about talent night. And like 3 days before the end, suddenly I learned about talent night. Have you got your talent ready or whatever? And it's like, well, I don't have a talent. And then I learned how low the bar is for talent night. And I kind of felt like, why should I have to go through this in order to get my certificate? Which is why I was there. I was there to get the certificate. I wanted the certificate. And now I believe I understand exactly why Mollison required it. And I think it is wise. I think it is a smart thing. And the point I tried to make to the students, which these people were already dug in like ticks on their point, I think that they just wanted to force change, and they didn't really care about on what topics. They were scraping the barrel when they came up with this. But I think that it's fair to say that, you know, to do it in front of a video camera, to do your talent night in front of a video camera is even better in this day and age. Anyway, so, but there was something else. What I wanted, I can't remember, but I do wish to advocate for growth above and beyond what Mollison wrote down. And I want us to grow as a greater community, a community of millions. You know, what are our philosophies? What are the things? And I kind of feel like the thing about profit, I think that I wish for it to be clear. I don't remember Mollison saying anything about embrace poverty or, you know, don't pursue coin. But it's possible that he did, and I don't know. But Sepp Holzer definitely clearly says pursue profit. And leading to this part about like helping these farmers to find the way to make extra coin, there's one last bit from this segment for today that I want to read out of Desert or Paradise. And it's about diversity. The best and most sustainable yield does not come from specialized intensive production, but from diversity in the use of the land. The more diverse a system is, the more stable it is. What does the monocultural farmer do? He removes the animal or plant from their natural cycle, isolates them, and makes them dependent on him. He now needs to provide everything they would get for themselves in a natural environment. He has to invest lots of money in order to specialize. He is now fixed on one product. And if something unforeseen happens, like dropping prices, climate change, or disease, he has a great loss. Specialization is a very doubtful undertaking. A natural, diverse system, like a water landscape, offers a lot more opportunities, and it is economically safer too. I have to look for market niches if I want to make good money, but I can plan ahead, react to the market, and easily switch to other products, while specialized competitors need to completely rethink when disaster strikes. I am able to quickly sell other products. Such a system gives great independence, is natural, and sustainable. All right.
That reminds me of an image earlier in the book, Paul, before we go on,
Okay,
where he's got fruit trees and mushroom logs underneath. So if it's a really wet year, the mushrooms will do really well and the cherries will split. If it's a really dry year, the cherries will do well and the mushrooms won't. So that's having both crops there doing their job in a natural environment.
Absolutely. It's beautiful. This is beautiful. All right. So anything else about this chunk of the book that we're reviewing today? So next week, we will continue on page 82. Oh, yes.
Sorry. I'm thinking about the economic system you're saying about GERT. Do you feel like GERT is incompatible with profit? Because it seems like you've offered so many things for so much. And I think if you didn't have if you were living hand to mouth for some reason, seems like it would be harder. Would you say that it's true that it would be harder for you to offer so many things to the world if you were focused on making your daily bread every day.
That is true. That is really true. I mean, to get to the point where I am, I stumbled into it really accidentally. I mean, I got obsessed with sharing what I had learned about horticulture mostly, but a few other things. And I posted it on the internet, and I eventually created forums, and I don't know, the same thing with software engineering. I just couldn't stop sharing my own personal discoveries and philosophies and things of that nature for free, and helping other people to understand this stuff that I think is so beautiful for free. And I just did it for free. I just paid for everything, and I did it for free while I worked my worky job. And then and I was pursuing coin the whole time because I had bills to pay and stuff like that. And eventually I started to monetize some of the free stuff. It was still available for free, but it had like an ad, or it had some little thing on it that somehow brought in some bit of money. And every, I don't know, 4 to 6 months, I would go on a day-long rant of like monetizing all the stuff I'd already put out on the internet. And then one day I kind of took a hard look at it, and I realized the amount of money coming in was greater than my personal expenses. I was free. I could do anything I want. So you're right, which is why in my book, Building a Better World, I have a whole chapter dedicated to devious financial plots. And it's kind of like, I wish to share this, but I kind of get and we talked about this in a previous podcast fairly recently, where it's kind of like, every time I bring it up, I kind of feel a little weird. People kind of think I'm pushing snake oil, but all I'm doing is sharing my thing, my story. But yeah, now, and I think it's also true, I'm going to advocate for people to make as much money as they want, and then simultaneously say that what's even better is GERT in it. And all the while I'm saying all this stuff, my annual income that I keep, I mean, a lot of money passes through my hands for all this stuff. I mean, like the Kickstarter income is a great example, but it's like the amount of taxable income I have every year is something like $3,000. So I live pretty humbly. But so I guess in a way I get all these people saying like I'm a money grubber, and I guess I have to say I am. Of course, I think I've done a really good job of keeping all the advertising stuff for all of my empire pretty light. It's pretty, and I give a lot away. I give a lot of stuff away for completely free. These podcasts are completely free. Of course, all 3 of you put coin into my Patreon account. Thank you very much. I mean, I don't really get any of that because I give it to the guy who does all the editing of the podcasts, and I think he does a lovely job, and I'm so glad that he's there doing it. But it's all those little bits and bobs add up. I guess I believe that the GERT path is a more beautiful destination than the path of making money. And I see it all the time where people are saying like, is there anybody making money with permaculture? I think Jeff Lawton's a great example. Clearly, he's making a lot of money with permaculture. I think that I could choose to not pursue the projects that I'm pursuing and just keep all the money that comes to me, and then I would be making a lot of money. But I choose to redirect that money into projects here. And so all three of you have been here to kind of see it, you know, what we've created here so far. So I don't know. When it comes to profit and money, I guess I'm a little weird. But I also feel strongly that I do not wish to shame anybody for pursuing profit or experiencing profit, because I see a lot of that, and I don't understand the benefit of the shaming. Why shame somebody for that? I don't.
So that they'll do something different. Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah.
Paul, would you say that gratitude is a good first step to profit? Because once you've said, okay, this is enough, I'm stable, I'm set, now I'm free to do the things that I think will be the most valuable, whether that's profit or just what you would have done with the profit. Like you could buy the thing or you could just get the thing a different way. And either way you have the thing. But it seems like once you're girded, you could then explore lots of avenues for profit, and you can also explore giving things away, which sometimes leads to profit. So I think it seems like it. I wanted to see if you thought it was also true that gratitude is a great first step for profit.
I think gratitude is a great first step for profit, mostly because it's like the kind of profit that you get is like whatever it is that you're doing is a soul building thing as opposed to a soul draining thing. And it seems like there's a lot of people where they have a worky job and it is a soul draining thing. And they pine to be away from this job. And whereas once you've achieved gratitude and suddenly you have far more apples than you could possibly eat, that seems like a pretty quick and easy way to earn some money, possibly. You know, if you're in a community that appreciates the value of an apple off of a tree, then there might be somebody that'd be willing to pay $10 a box, self-pick. You know, and so then they walk away with 15 boxes and you made $150. And it was easy. I don't know. So I think that that gratitude could be an easy way towards a different flavor of profit. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's a thing to explore. I mean, the other thing is that I mean, I have a weird thing about the word nonprofit, because there are people that work for a nonprofit that are getting paid $100,000 or more. And do we say that they are profiting? I mean, a lot of people would say that they are not, because that's their wage. So I don't know.
Nonprofit is sort of like a legal definition. You could look at it that way.
So I've got this weird thing about the phrase nonprofit. I mean, I have no problem with these entities existing and doing their business model that they're doing. It's just that it strikes me as odd to call it a nonprofit. And I've always been a little weird about that. But it's kind of like if somebody's got a worky job and they're taking home $50,000 a year, is that their profit? You know, are they profiting from that arrangement by $50,000 a year? I don't, you know, that gets into some squishy territory over the definition of what profit means. But on the other hand, if that same person goes out and they've got their own business and then they take home $50,000 a year, I think we would say that that is their profit. And so I don't know, I would have to say that the worky job person, the wage, that's still $50,000, and that person that's making $100,000, the nonprofit, that is a profit. They have profited from that arrangement. I could go on for a couple of hours about my problems, the word nonprofit, but I don't think this is probably the proper podcast for that.
Well, and I think the
Opalyn?
challenge is with the English language in that when I heard you talk about profit, it had like 3 to 5 slightly different definitions. And so that adds an extra challenge to the conversation even. But I had something to add to this podcast that I wanted to share.
Okay.
So first, you all see that Zach Weiss was one of the instructors for the 2017 PDC that is available as an online streaming, what do you call it? A streaming video lectures.
Well, there's 177 hours of the PDC and ATC that we video.
Yeah.
So it's all there.
So, and Zach was one of the instructors, and I've watched his video probably the most of all of them. And he's gone on to create this website called Water Stories. And if you scroll down, he's got this amazing video that talks about the full water cycle and the half water cycle, which is restoring the hydrological balance within an ecosystem. That I felt the graphics and the description were really amazing. So I wanted to encourage people to look at that. And the website is waterstories.app. And Zach is learned from Sepp. And so for those of you interested in Sepp's work, go buy the book on Kindle, because that's the only affordable one, in my opinion, if you like reading on devices. Check out your library. One of the 5 libraries that I have access to actually had a copy. So get your hands on the book.
Desert or Paradise.
Desert or Paradise.
Yeah.
And check out Zach's videos, because they're really informative and helped me understand a lot of what Sepp was talking about.
Yeah, Zach is doing some amazing stuff. He was producing a movie a couple years ago and showed me some bits of it, and it was like, oh wow, this is profound. This is amazing. And then more recently, I was talking to him on the phone, and he said something went. He told me, he says, "You'll appreciate this, Paul." Comedy happened, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have a powerful appreciation for anybody trying to produce something. You know, now when I watch a movie and I see produced by, I'm kind of going, "Oh man, dude, yeah, feel your pain." You know, it's crazy that any movie exists ever. So, but yes, Zach, I think, has more time with Sepp than I do. I'm pretty sure he does. Anything else? Oh yeah, go back to my kicks. Oh, look, it went up while we've been talking. It went up several $100s. Nice. Oh, now I got to go back and look at all the things and be all nervous and excited about the Kickstarter again. Thanks for bringing that up. It's a fun ride. I feel very loved. I mean, whenever somebody says anything ugly or nasty, then it's like, this is kind of counter to that. These are people that are putting up actual dollars. So I don't know. It's like putting their money where their mouth is. All right. Anything else about this section of the book? No. Well then.
I think we should finish chapter 2 for this week's upcoming reading. So that's almost 10 pages.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm now flipping through. Ooh, look at that. Yes, it's almost exactly 10 pages. Okay, I predict we'll be done with chapter 2 next week. If you like this sort of thing, come on out to the forums at permies.com, where we talk about desert or paradise, homesteading and permaculture all the time.
All the time.